Hello, good morning. Happy to see people joining the webinar, making the case for soil health monitoring. My name is Giovanna Giuffre from Isinnova. I'm very happy to be here today, Friday, just before holiday for some of you. And we are organizing this webinar together with Soil Association and in the framework of a European project called Artificial Intelligence for Soil Health. We are waiting a few minutes to allow people to join in, but I will take also these few minutes for a brief introduction. So my name is Giovanna Giuffre. I work at Isinnova, is a consultancy based in Rome. My background is legal, but in the past 20 years, I've been working across environmental policy. And in the last years, especially following up soil health and also policy action strategy link with the mission Soil Deal for Europe and the related strategy and the latest soil monitoring law. We are lucky to have three speakers today with us that will be introduced later on. But before, I would like just to give few housekeeping rule. So for those of you not aware of Zoom, there is a question answer button that will be used during this webinar for collecting your ideas, opinion, also background information on your project and organization. And we really invite all the participants to share questions, but also ideas that will be used during this webinar, but also to connect after this event. The webinar is recorded, and the link will be shared after this event with all of you, and also published in the LinkedIn and the project website. We invite the participant to share with colleague and the person that might be interested to listen to the recording. Is also part of a series of webinar, as we will mention at the end, organized in the framework of this project. So keep in touch and follow the LinkedIn website, the LinkedIn page, so you will be informed of also the next event. So as a brief introduction on the project, is a 5 years project funded by the European Commission under the mission Soil Deal for Europe. Is coordinated by Aarhus University. Now we are entering the 3rd year of the project, and is really aimed at accelerating the collection and use of soil health information using artificial intelligence technology to support policy at European level, as well as farmers at local level. So I think is the real added values is this project is working with data at different scale, try to connect the type of information that might be needed by farmers to improve practice, by national organization to understand the soil health at national level, as well as providing an overarching view on trends and change that might be provide insight for European policy. So is really making the case for soil health, as this webinar said, but at different level, and giving insight for different stakeholders. And our effort, especially thanks to Soil Association, is trying to engage with different stakeholders during the course of the project through co-design the solution, test the solution, understanding their needs and difficulties on using data. And the important part is also that the solution and the methods are currently being tested in 11 sites, covering 11 pedoclimatic regions across Europe. So if you want to know more, really look at the project website and ask us question or connect, especially if you have a project or strategies connected. Before presenting our speakers, there are a few questions we would like to engage with you, also for understanding your needs in this project and your background on the use of data, on your experience, to what extent you are involved on soil monitoring. So please connect to Menti. We are all tired, but it's very useful for us understanding your knowledge of and your needs on soil monitoring. So if you can either scan the QR code that is shown in this PowerPoint or directly connect, I think it is shared also in the chat where you can click to connect with Menti. And there are a few questions to understand better our audience. The first one is, what are your domain of expertise? So from soil health science, data science, there is a strong component, land use or management practice, involved in land use and management practice, or land use and management policy. So here we share a very good mix for the moment of participant that is ideal. So it's not one type of participant, but is a good mix of the four of them, with maybe a higher participation from soil health science. And I think the three presentations that will cover the different aspects of this background. So policy is always underrepresented. I think it's always it's hard to have social science and policy in this aspect. I think they will increase in the next years the attention of policy on this aspect, hopefully. So maybe I don't know. Yes, this last question is: are you actively involved with soil monitoring campaigns? And this is a different level and scale, from farm to district, national, EU. So we would like to understand what your participation, previous participation on soil monitoring campaign. So from the answer, we could see that rarely and not at all. There is some, but also, so we have a part of you that have not up to now been directly involved on some monitoring campaign, but sometimes, often, and very often is also gathering more and more data. So some of you might be interested in understanding how they are run and why and what data they can provide. And some of you have experience like half and half, I would say, a bit more have already been engaged on some kind of monitoring campaign. It's interesting to see that in the chat there are presentation of the person engaged that could provide more information also on why and how they have been involved. Here, the third question about you is the scale in which we are predominantly work on wheat. So we see, and continentalism means European as well as other continent. So is taking, let's say, more a world region view or global view. And it's interesting for us also to understand how to tailor information and data to potential user of the project output. So we could see the majority of you are engaged on at a national level. So the last question is the motivation, and can be a word. I know it's hard to be creative on Friday, July, with either weather, storm, storm or storm. But if you can give a word on why you are here and what your expectation and needs, will be great. So there is an interest on networking and technology, understanding what technology can do. And this is actually what the project is really, this is a bit more hard as a question, as require an elaboration. So it's good also the aim, the final aim to save the planet. And I think that is also, we should not forget that at the end is that, there is an interest on soil monitoring law, but also looking at perspective. I think a word that come back is learn. So it's for sure there is some, still all of us need to learn perspective, scale, why, and is maybe the most interesting aspect of soil health, that there is so much still to understand of the different perspective from regional background and policy area. So also interest on the project, but also on the ground, in ground data, how to get there, what are the methods, and there is a presentation on method especially, and awareness of good practice. So thank you. We hope to be able to rise on your expectation, and I think these are good motivation for our speaker that I will be briefly presenting before giving them the word. So the first presentation will be given by Niels Broderts. Sorry, my pronunciation, who is currently a scientific project officer. I used Soil Observatory, that we all know for the work they're doing and engagement on data collection and sharing. And it's very important if you can take it also as a reference beyond the project, because it collects really data information across project on soil data. So it's really something you should have in your bookmark for link. And he's working also especially on soil monitoring task, and is also the coordinator for soil degradation dashboard. His background and his environmental science, and especially on human climate environmental interaction. He has a PhD on geography on KU Leuven and VU Amsterdam. So he will be our first speakers, and he will give a European perspective. So our second speaker that will be more grounded, let's say, on the farmers, come from Soil Association, and is an experienced farming advisor with a strong background in sustainable food system and environmental management. So it's 20 years within the industry, has worked with Soil Association for the past 5 years, especially on farm and land use. So he's a qualified agronomist and study agriculture in this is help me Karen.
Aberystwyth, it's Welsh. Aberystwyth.
That was a surprise, but Welsh is well known for the agronomy. So, and fine, last but not least, is Fatima Attefard, who is a postdoctoral researcher at Stockholm University. Her background is in social science with a focus on digital soil mapping, soil spectroscopy, and remote sensing. So she will have all the question on technology and methods. And she's working on the project Soil Health, especially for the development of in situ data monitoring tools, and is working on the pilot site. So this is more the regional and pilot aspect of the project, while Karen is representing also the farmers, let's say, at large, and needs the European, let's say, broader view, also because I probably forget to mention, but EUSO is part of GRC, that is the European Research Center, just to finalize. And please also complement your presentation during I'm happy, but I'm happy to give the floor to Niels for the first. Just as I think we skip the agenda, but there will be just 10, 15 minutes of presentation and then the question and answer aspect. So please write your question during the presentation and we will come back to them after. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I try to share my screen. I hope it's clearly visible. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. And thank you, Giovanna, for the kind introduction. And thank you to Soil Association for the invitation to talk to you about the policy perspective on soil health monitoring. To start with and to start introducing why soil monitoring is so important for policymakers, I added this figure, this graph showing with a few numbers, which are to some extent based on soil monitoring, why soil degradation is such an important issue at the level of the EU. We know, based on soil monitoring efforts, that around 60% of EU soils are currently unhealthy and are under influence of some soil degradation processes. We see also, for instance, that more than 300,000 contaminated sites in the EU need to be remediated. And we see, for instance, that above 65% of agricultural soils have high nutrient input levels and are at high risk of eutrophication. And it are these types of numbers that are important to show to policymakers why there is such a high need for policy intervention and why we need policy strategies and policy frameworks to be developed to restore, to protect and safeguard our soils. I will give you a second example. Back in 2020, so 5 years ago, when the EU Soil strategy and also the Mission Soil was still under development, the Mission Soil board members of the Mission Soil, together with colleagues from USO and some other scientific partners, they made a very preliminary assessment of unhealthy soils at the EU level. And they estimated, based on soil monitoring efforts, they estimated that around between 60 and 70% of EU soils are unhealthy. And this number was recuperated and was included in the rationale for the EU Soil strategy for 2030. And if you now go to these texts and you go to the text of the EU Soil strategy or to the Mission Soil, there is indeed included in the rationale of these policy frameworks a reference towards this number. And so this number that is coming from soil monitoring efforts is really used to explain why policy frameworks are so important and why we need policy actions regarding soils. A few words also on how soil monitoring is done at the EU level. Well, currently the main source of information for soil monitoring at EU level is the Lucas Soil Survey, which is the EU-wide standardized and harmonized soil survey, which has been taking place in 2009, 15, 18, and 22. And which contains more than 40,000 sampling locations. And for all these sampling locations, there are standardized, harmonized methods, and they allows us to create EU-wide data sets on soil properties, on soil degradation processes, and they allow us to create maps, like indicated here on the slides, EU-wide maps on soil properties, on soil degradation indicators, etc. And these are important sources for information to provide to policymakers, and these are important data sets for policy support. They are also very important as they are included in our USO soil degradation dashboard. Our dashboard combines 19 soil degradation indicators for which we have EU-wide data sets. And they are then combined in our dashboards, and using thresholds and the one out all out approach is then used to define where degraded soils are located in the EU. And this is a very important tool for communication towards policymakers, because it's a very useful tool to highlight where hotspots of soil degradation are located and where there is a need for policy intervention. And also it's an important communication tool, not only towards policymakers, but also towards the wider public, to create a support base for policy interventions on soils. So it's a very important communication tool. As I said, there are 19 soil degradation indicators based on soil monitoring efforts, grouped around several soil degradation processes, like soil erosions, like soil pollution, like the loss of soil biodiversity and soil nutrients. But of course, these indicators are not perfect and they still need to be improved. And therefore, there is an important role of Mission SOL projects like the AI for Soul Health project to further improve these data sets and to further improve this assessment of soul health in the EU to better inform our policymakers. This dashboard is mainly being used on the EU level, but also at the national level, it can be very useful. Just here an example on this slide, one figure that we added recently to our dashboard, showing at the x-axis the different countries and comparing the countries with each other, showing which country is performing better than the other. And then, for instance, policymakers from Italy, it's here indicated in the figure, can see whether they are performing better or worse than other countries. For instance, Italy is here performing better than Netherlands and Belgium, which are more to the left, and they are performing worse compared to Portugal or Croatia, which is more on the right. So it's, again, an important communication tool that can also be used at a national level to highlight the need for policy action on souls. And indeed, there is an important role for the EUSO, as the EU Soul Observatory is responsible for the soul monitoring aspects at EU level. They are coordinating Lucas Soul. We are coordinating the dashboard. We will also create a dashboard on desertification, on nutrients, also on pollution and a pollution watch list. So there is an important role for the EUSO to inform our policymakers and to provide them with the best data, the best tools, and the best knowledge so that they are supported in creating these policy frameworks. Beside that, there is also an important role for the Mission Soul. Regarding soul monitoring, the Mission Soul, as one of the objectives of Mission Soul, is to improve soul monitoring. That is here indicated in orange in the figure, because the Mission Soul has 4 building blocks, one on research and innovation, on living labs, and on soul literacy. But important for us today is also that in orange, they have also a soul monitoring building block. They are aiming to improve soul monitoring aspects. And not only that, also the Mission Soul needs soul monitoring, because soul monitoring is needed for them to track the progress towards the mission objectives and to track whether they are progressing towards the objectives that were framed at the beginning of the Mission Soul. Because demonstrating that the health of European souls are improving would be a clear indicator of the success of the Mission Soul and also of other European Green Deal policies. Then when looking ahead and in the upcoming years, hopefully we will have soon an approved soul monitoring and resilience directive, or in short, soul monitoring law. I will just briefly touch on that, but the status of the soul monitoring law is that there is a provisional agreement after the trilogue process that was in spring, so earlier this year. And now currently there are some legal and linguistic checks, and then the next step will be a vote in the council and an adoption, possible adoption in the parliament. And possibly by the end of the year, we have the soul monitoring law finally agreed. And this will be an important step because it will be the first ever EU legislation on souls. There will be a clear objective to achieve healthy souls by 2050. There will be clear definitions on what is a healthy soul, and obviously there will be a very important part on monitoring and assessment. Very briefly, so the soul monitoring law will put in place a comprehensive, harmonized, standardized soul health monitoring framework across all member states of the EU. They will build on the Lucas Soul strategy for their sampling strategy. There will be soul descriptors describing the state of the soul, both the biological, chemical, physical state of the soul. And then based on sustainable target values or operational trigger values, it will be possible to define whether the souls are in good, moderate, or poor conditions. And then there will be a descriptor by descriptor evaluation. So not really a one out loud approach as we are now using, for instance, the dashboard, but more a descriptor by descriptor evaluation. And then finally, just 3 more slides, I think, some prospects, some challenges that still remain on soil monitoring on EU level. So one of the challenges I want to highlight here is that we have our traditional soil monitoring, like the LucaSoil, but next to that, we have also data coming from remote sensing, from drones, from proximal sensing, so spectroscopy, citizen science. And the challenge is to combine all these different data streams and to integrate these data streams to come with a more comprehensive and a more complete assessment of soil health at the EU scale. Another challenge is also to describe and to detect changes in soil health. We have now well described the current status of soil based on our user dashboard, but policymakers are also very interested in what are the changes of soils since, for instance, the start of the EU soil strategy? Do we see any changes on the field thanks to that? So that's also a challenge for us as a scientific community and the entire community to prove these changes in one or the other direction. And then another prospect. When using soil monitoring, you can use different indicator frameworks. What's now being used at the EU level is mainly the free from degradation framework, which is just using indicators, thresholds, and then a one out allowed approach to define whether soil is healthy or unhealthy. But beside that framework, there are also many other indicator frameworks possible. And I took this figure from a publication that is currently in a review and will be hopefully soon be published. It's a collaboration between AI for Soil Health, USO, and other partners. And it shows that there are also other indicator frameworks that can be useful for policymakers at different levels, or depending on the purpose of your soil monitoring, maybe different indicator frameworks can be more useful. For instance, the fitness for purpose framework, where we are looking at the function or the customer, or the external benchmarking, where you are comparing with the best practice in your soil region, or the value assessment, which can also be a very useful indicator framework for policymakers. So depending on the scale, depending on target audience, maybe different indicator frameworks can be more appropriate. And also there is an important role for the Mission Soil projects. When you look here at the timescale, from on the left with the start of the LucaSoil, we mainly used a free from degradation framework. So we combined different indicators. We used a one out allowed approach to come to an assessment of unhealthy soils in the EU based on our dashboard. But in the upcoming years, we can also fill in these different frameworks to better inform policymakers on the state of soils, depending on the scale, depending on the purpose. An important role for the Mission Soil project is there to build on that, to refine indicators, to refine thresholds, and maybe also to develop a soil health index. We will discuss that also later on in the discussion, but it can be an important communication tool, a very simple communication tool towards policymakers. And now I will leave it here. I thank you for your attention. I will be happy to take your questions now or later in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Niels, for the very comprehensive, interesting presentation on the interface for data science and policy. There are a few questions in the chat, but I invite you all to post the question there, as we will have a question and answer session after the next presentation. So I give the floor to Karen Fischer. Thank you.
Thank you. I've handed the responsibility of my presentation technology to Cordelia. So yeah, welcome everyone. I'm going to briefly explore why soil health monitoring matters and what we can practically right now do to make it count on farm. Next slide, please. The question I always ask myself and ask the farmers I work with is, so what difference does collecting this data actually make? Like, what practical decisions can be made from it or improvements in soil health seen, so that we are not gathering data for its own sake, but can make decisions such as when to graze, when to rest the field, whether you really need a subsoil, and also for decisions on reducing inputs, for example, so nutrients, if you already have sufficient already in the soil. Another reason is to benchmark, to monitor improvements in the soil, to actually see if those changes in practices are working on the ground. And it's also useful if you're thinking of investing in things like natural capital market opportunities. And there's also an increasing need to supply data to funders, suppliers, etc. The key is often to think what indicators to prioritize, depending on why you're collecting this data. Next slide, please. So on the subject of what key indicators to prioritize, I'm going to discuss some of the key indicators we used for our AI for Soil Health England pilot site as a case study. So Wood Oak Farm lies just to the west of London at Maple Cross in Hertfordshire. It extends over just 300 acres and includes arable, pasture land and around 75 acres of semi-natural woodland. The benchmarking and monitoring changes in the soil health are particularly interesting on this site, as historically it was an intensively farmed arable farm. So in 2020, Wood Oak started the conversion to organic certification, and its practices are focused on regenerating the soil. So they're doing practices such as diverse slays to boost organic matter, feed that soil biology, improve structure and fix nitrogen. They've also been taking a break from arable cash crops with lucerne as it's deep rooting and a nitrogen fixer, so it can help improve the soil structure, fix nitrogen, to reduce reliance on artificial fertilizer in a conventional system. Obviously doesn't apply here, but for conventional farmers, also builds organic matter and can help suppress problem weeds. Wood Oaks have also, over the last 5 years, planted over 1,000 trees and 4,000 hedge plants, which can improve structure, increase organic matter, reduce erosion, etc. Next slide. So with soil monitoring, it is just making a start and then being consistent in what you do, so you can see improvements. So as I said, Wood Oaks is interesting as it was intensive and conventionally farmed historically. There was some legacy data collected in 2021 and 2024. So in 2021, they sampled just 4 fields and focused on a mix of chemical, biological and physical parameters, including nutrients, pH, cation exchange, organic matter, biological indicators such as bacterial fungal balance, and drainage rate and physical assessments. It gave a baseline, but this was small and mainly focused on indicators that had to be sent off to an external laboratory. And then last year, Soil Association Exchange did sampling in 9 fields, and these included some more kind of farmer-friendly in-field indicators, such as bulk density and earthworms, carbon-nitrogen ratio, organic matter, physical structure, and pH. This kind of shift reflects a more practical integrated approach, combining both the lab testing with visual and biological indicators that farmers can actually assess themselves in farm. So it matters because by building this legacy data, like the farm is now in a stronger position to assess trends, compare across seasons, and feed into landscape scale monitoring. It really helps kind of to understand how soil responds to management change over time. Okay, next slide. So these are just some photos of the day. So it was spring this year. We went back and we used the Lucas sampling point protocol that Niels mentioned as part of the AI for Soil Health project. This was something that was new to myself and the team actually using this protocol for soil sampling. So it's involved a, say, GIS map central point, and then you sample kind of 2 meters from that central point, northwest, east, and south. And on the day, we use both traditional and novel soil indicators so that we could model it for both science and more farmer-informed monitoring on the ground. Next slide, please. So these were the indicators we were measuring at Wood Oaks, ones that are widely accepted across the EU frameworks that were discussed in the previous presentation. So we looked at getting the texture analysis, which influences the water holding and nutrient retention in the soil. We looked at organic carbon, as this is a key indicator of biological activity and long-term function. We also looked at pH and electrical conductivity, just gives us insight into the chemical balance and salt levels in the soil, and then phosphorus and nitrogen, as these are essential macronutrients, plus cation exchange capacity and bulk density, which, can I say, shows the nutrient availability and that the compaction and root penetration in the soil. To add further depth to our understanding, we also tried some novel indicators. So we did environmental DNA to assess the microbiodiversity, enzymatic activity, again, which looked at that microbial function and nutrient cycling, and also a BES, which is value evaluation of soil structure, which is a practical farm-friendly tool that kind of looks at the compaction, tilt, and aggregation of soil in the field. So by combining these conventional and more novel indicators, this allowed us to measure soil in a functional way that's both scientifically robust and can be practically relevant for on-farm decisions. Next slide. Just a few photos, say, of the environmental DNA testing, which say it's very precise with having to measure the soil and making sure that everything is completely sterilized and clean and using gloves so there's no cross-contamination, anything else in there. Next slide, please. Say one of my main jobs was making sure everything is recorded so that we knew exactly what was in what bag, where it was going. When it got to the lab, it could be easily identified. And the other photo is the visualization of soil structure that I mentioned, which say is a useful in-field tool for farmers. Next slide. So most of the sampling we did in spring is still being analysed. However, we have had the bulk density and available nitrogen results back. So the results on this slide is bulk density, which gives us a good indication of soil compaction and structure. So lower values, less than 1.1 grams per cubic centimetre, are desirable as they allow the air and water to move freely and support root growth and soil biology. We can see that most of the biodiversity and organic conversion areas are in the moderate range. However, the darker red and brown areas in the northeast and south show elevated bulk density. So this would be a good indicator to us that potentially those fields are compacted, or we've got poor structure in those areas. Okay, and then the blue and white one says the nitrogen levels. So we had this done as part of the enzymatic as well. So when we get those results, we can put those together. But this shows the plant available nitrogen. So for a farmer making a decision for cropping, it would show does any more nitrogen actually need to be added to those areas. So we can see higher nitrogen levels. Of course, most of the organic conversion blocks probably likely used because they've been using these lays and organic manures and kind of biological nitrogen fixing crops over the last few years. There's a few areas which sit below 10 kilograms a hectare, especially near kind of field margins. But these just may be naturally lower fertility soils. So you can see, even from this small bit of data that we've had back, we're building up a picture of what is going on in which part of the fields potentially need subsoiling or have low organic matter, for example. And then we can kind of farmers can match those zones with either kind of reduced or poor yields or poor rooting in those areas, and able to prioritize things like tillage operations, cover cropping, or compost manure applications in those areas. Next slide. And again, touch on this briefly, because obviously you heard a lot about it in the previous presentation. It's not really my area of expertise, but so Europe is moving quite fast with what they're looking at with national frameworks and legally binding targets. In the UK, currently it's more of a voluntary effort through things like our stable farming incentive, but we have nothing binding or standardized yet, which so it means farmers might miss out on kind of support and being able to compare that data across Europe, which is why projects like this are so important. Next slide, please. To say more tools and opportunities and some of the more technology that we used. Wood Oaks. Things like the SOAR Data Cube, which is for ongoing monitoring and real-time in-field analyzing, come out of the AI for Soil Health project, and it just means that the data can be standardized and easier to compare. So if we're doing it in the UK and then different sites across Europe, we know that it's been done the same protocol and we can compare that. So it helps farmers, advisors, and policymakers move beyond single indicators, and we can see wider patterns over time. And it also helps bridge that gap between scientific monitoring and those real world on the ground management decisions. Soil Association Exchange, which is part of the Soil Association, that helps you benchmark your farm and track changes over time. And it's designed to turn your data into insights on the farm and not just reports for farmers. And that makes it easier to link the soil health to economic and ecological outcomes. There's also apps such as the microbarometer. This is a quick, portable, and cost-effective tool that helps farmers, advisors measure micro biomass in the soil, and say it can be done on farm under an hour, just using simple extraction and a test kit which paired with a smartphone app. And it measures fungal and bacterial ratio, so it kind of offers that deeper insight into soil ecosystem balance. And because it can be done on farm relatively cheaply, it can be repeated regularly and affordably on farm. Next slide. So just kind of to wrap up on that, if you're a farmer here today, and feel a bit overwhelmed by everything, you don't have to start off doing anything complicated. You can literally make it as simple as just getting a spade and doing a worm count, and that is enough to start. You just need to make sure that it matters to your farm, and say policy is catching up, but we don't have to wait. So monitoring, so it doesn't need to be complex to be useful. We just need to build knowledge together so we can create a more resilient farming future. Next slide. That's all from me, thank you. If you've got any questions, my contact details, if you've got any questions.
Thank you, Karen. Very interesting, and I think it's interesting to see how the scale influence the type of information you need, also the type of decision you need to make, and how much is important the evaluation of practice for different type of decision that could be made at farm level and national European scale. For questions, there are many in the chat box, and we'll use them for the session. But before going to Fatima's presentation, one more question for you. So please go back to your Menti app or scan. I'm sure there is the information on also in the chat shared. And as an introduction to Fatima's presentation, I would like to ask you, what are the top 3 indicators you use to analyze the healthiness of the soil that either you monitor or someone for you monitor or you read in the literature? Which are for you the 3 indicators you analyze or you think are more important? So there are questions popping and that go from organic matter, earthworm count, soil moisture, erosion. So we see salinity. And there are a few questions also on type of indicator that we'll try to go back in the conclusion. I will give a few minutes more also to digest the 2 presentations that I think they require some time to see. But while we finalize, I do see a lot of answers right now. So maybe we can give the word to Fatima and maybe look also back. You can keep on voting as we will share the slide also from Menti at the end of the session, and also to all the participants together with the link to the recording. So Fatima, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, Joanna, for the nice introduction. I'm glad that I'm here and I can talk about what we are doing exactly at AI for Soil Health project and what indicators that Karen already mentioned some of them, but I'm going to do a little bit more of the details of the indicators that we are doing. But also, I hope you see my slides clearly because, okay, yeah. But also, as Niels clearly mentioned, that about 60 to 70% of our soil in EU are considered unhealthy, and we need to do the monitoring of the soil health. So it's really important for us. But we need to progress towards these 8 mission objectives that they are already defined. But in this project, we have 13 pilot sites and we are doing different soil health indicators. Before I go to the indicator, I need to mention that we already have Lucas dataset that Niels mentioned that it has about 40,000 observation, and also other EU-wide dataset that we already have. But EU is far more from the simple. It's a bit more complicated or complex. We have the saline soil in Croatia to the post-glacial soil in Sweden or in Finland. So each of these soil has their own unique characteristics, and monitoring of all these soils is not an easy job. It's quite challenging, I would say. And that's why exactly we need to monitor the soil health. And that is why we have different pilot sites at different parts of EU that we are doing this monitoring. But the other reason that we also are doing this monitoring in different pilot sites, because we want to see the soil health indicators under local condition. So we go to the different pilot sites, we take samples, we analyze between these methods, and we are going to find a correlation. But mechanization and like increasing the population, as we already mentioned, is going to put the soil under the danger of the degradation. That's why we need to do the soil health monitoring. But as you see now in the Mentimeter, but also as you see in the literature, whenever someone talks about soil health, the first thing comes to the mind is usually physical and chemical properties. Like now in Mentimeter, the most frequent replies was salinity, pH, organic carbon. That's right, they are good indicators of soil health, but they are not they are not the only ones. Sorry. So we need to also consider about the biological and microbiological function of the soil. So that's why here we are not focusing only on that wet chemistry that you already know, I'm sure about that, but we are also focusing a little bit more focus on this set of indicator, which is a spectroscopy, environmental eDNA, enzymatic activity, fungi to bacteria ratio, infiltration rate, and soil aggregate stability. So first, let's talk about the spectroscopy. Spectroscopy is the study of light, reflectance, or absorption, and it can be in different wavelength ranges. The ones that we see, the ones that we don't see, like visible and near-infrared ranges, and also mid-infrared ranges. But the one that we are focusing more in this project is visible and near-infrared ranges. The result that you get from the spectroscopy is a curve with many peaks and valleys, but with the help of AI and machine learning, we are translating this data to the soil properties like organic carbon, pH, salinity, and other properties as well. But one thing that we are doing more also is this device that called NeoSpectra, that we take it to the field, and we are measuring also in situ data, because we want to see how close we can get from the data into the field from the ones that we are already getting from the lab data. The other methods that we are doing is eDNA. Any genetic material coming from the environment, whether it's soil, water, air, they call eDNA, like environmental eDNA. And we are using, the method is metabarcoding. That is the method that we are using. And it's good for estimating the biodiversity and composition of different soil taxa, like which fungi are more in the soil available. But also they can give us information about the dominating biological function, like which process or, yeah. The eDNA result is going to be recorded in 2 indexes, richness index and beta diversity indexes. The other method is soil enzymatic activity. We know that enzymes are really important and they are releasing by the living organism that they are living in the soil. And our partner, DigitSoil, they are a startup based in Switzerland. They are making this innovative tool that you just put the soil in these tubes and you add a reaction gel, and then you can just scan the soil, and then you can see about the enzymatic activity. Enzymes are really important in key soil processes such as nutrient cycling, organic matter decomposition, but they really have some benefits because the soil is going through the minimum disturbance, and also they are quite adaptable. The other method that we are doing is fungi to bacteria ratio. This is also another company. It's called it's based on US, and it's called Macrobiometer. This one is a portable kit that the farmer can go to the field and check their healthiness of the soil and check if the practices that they are doing are working in the right direction that they want or not. This gives us the fungi to bacteria ratio, and the assumption is the healthier soil would have the higher fungi to bacteria ratio, as the fungi have an important role in soil structure, but also if the fungi to bacteria ratio is higher, meaning that more nutrients available to the plants as well. This method is quite easy. It's only 20 minutes. It's low cost. So this also can be a method for a healthiness of the soil. The other method that we are trying, infiltration rate. Infiltration can give us many information about infiltration capacity or the hydraulic properties of the topsoil, and we can get information about the risk of ponding and erosion. There are many methods that they are doing infiltration, but the one that we are doing in this project, it's really simple. You just need a really few drops, like liter of water, not tons of water, no. It's just you need a simple can and you add it to the soil. And the assumption here also, the healthier the soil is, meaning the soil is less compacted, so it would swallow more water as well. So we record the time and then we wait until the soil absorb all the water. And the last method, but not least, is soil aggregate stability. That this is the app. And to do that, you only need to have 3 aggregates of your soil, and you have you put the aggregates on the Petri dish. The app would take the first image, and then you disperse it into the water, and then you wait it for 10 minutes, and then the app would take another image based on these differences of the area. You would have the soil stability index. But as I said, we are doing all these measurements like eDNA, spectroscopy, but we are not going to ignore the classical sampling like bulk density or other method as well, like wet chemistry. We are doing all of these together. And some of these methods that I already explained, they are quite easy to do, but like some of them, like eDNA, is more complicated and probably it needs more specialized laboratory. But some methods like macrobiometer, aggregate, infiltration rate, then they can be easier as well. Thank you for listening, and I'm here. If you have any question, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Thank you. It was very clear and interesting to complement the previous 2 presentations. And I'm afraid I'm falling on the stereotype of Italian not managing time well because we have clearly a time issue. But what we will try to do is to merge a question and answer and moderated discussion by looking at the question and answer. And we have still a few questions of the Menti to pose to the participant, so keep the Menti open, but we will also would like to look at your question and have a moderated discussion that tackle. I will just, and I invite the speakers also to pick the question, but I will just maybe try to start with Niels and the first question posed. I think we can see some are technical, related to the type of administrative level, so the level of data provided by EUSO and GRC, and there are 2 related also to what extent they cover soil sealing and soil biodiversity, that can be a bit merged, and one that is more policy related, 2 more policy related, to what extent this data will be based or are based for a policy like Common Agriculture Policy on nature restoration regulation. So are still ready to be fed into policy. And also a question that I found quite interesting is to what extent member states are looking at that and commenting and taking that in consideration, so are able to trigger a policy comparison and discussion similar to what happened to energy, for example, or water issue. So we know that ranking countries can be a way of inviting improving themselves, let's say, in some areas. So I just try to summarize very in a simple way. So feel free also to pick details that I didn't mention.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, to start with the first question on the which administrative level we are providing data. So the user dashboard is providing data at a NETS 2 level. So not at the lowest administrative level. That is because of the resolution of the data sets that are currently available. So we cannot go into too much spatial detail there, because the dashboard is really aimed to provide information at the EU level or at the regional level. Also, you will notice when you zoom in our dashboard in your specific field or your specific garden, you will maybe find some strange things, but that's mainly due to the resolution of the data available and the data aggregation. So that's on that part. On Soul Sealing, yes, of course, Soul Sealing is also included in our dashboard, as Soul Sealing is one of the most important soil degradation processes that we have. So it's included, and it's based on satellite information coming from the European Environmental Agency, so Copernicus data. Also, biodiversity, yes, so that biodiversity is included in LucasSoil. So since 2018, so in the two campaigns, 2018 and 22, there was a soil biodiversity module in LucasSoil. So it is monitored, it is included, as it is a very important process that need to be monitored. Although, yeah, we still need to improve these aspects, because if you look at the data of 2018, it are less than, if I remember well, less than 1,000 samples for the entire EU. So it's actually quite limited still. So we are still working on that to improve that. So also the Soil Monitoring Law will help there. We have our experts here at the JRC specifically focusing on soil biodiversity. So it's a very important aspect, and we are maybe looking there at eDNA as Fatima clearly introduced in the previous presentation. Then, if I may continue, then on the policy aspects, of course, our data is also being used for other policy frameworks. So we are not only supporting the soil strategy or not only the soil monitoring law, but also the CAP and the nature restoration regulation is supported by our data. Same for the carbon removal certification framework. And we're also supporting that, and we are also providing their data, tools, knowledge to support these policy frameworks. And then on the question whether member states can comment and can give feedback on the data. So for what we have now in our dashboard, these figures and these graphs are not yet provided to member states to provide feedback. This is just the scientific data, which is in the dashboard, and the figure that I showed you where different member states are compared with each other is just another way of displaying the same data that is was already in the dashboard. So for this data, the countries did not yet comment on that. This will be, of course, different in the soil monitoring law. When in the soil monitoring law, we will have a legal data stream, and we will have a legal monitoring regarding soils. So there, on these legal data streams, the member states, of course, will have the opportunity to comment, to give feedback, and to work together with us towards a proper way of displaying this legal data, and that will be the legal monitoring of soil health. I hope I covered most of the questions. Sorry to be so brief, but I think we are still behind schedule, right?
No, I think you made a great, concise answer, and that was not easy to do. So thank you. And there are a few coming in, and we will see if we manage also to come back for a second round of question. Karen, there are a few questions also. I don't know if you have your favorite and you want to pick on these, or shall I proceed?
Because I look at some of them, I was thinking might be more relevant to Fatima because obviously she has more of a scientific background with them. But I think the one on where is it?
Because there is one on metrics and action that for sure. I'm
Yes.
afraid, that I
Yeah,
see
okay.
that was marked. So
Yeah,
I
I can
think
answer that one.
it's important to connect the data, metrics, and action. So how we see how this process is being developed at policy level. You have experience at national and farm level. So
yeah, I would say it's very, like a lot of these things, it's very context dependent. So a higher ratio of either fungal or bacteria isn't like necessarily better. But you need to kind of look at it alongside the other indicators, like obviously like the bulk density, the root depth, the organic matter levels. So the goal really is building that long-term kind of soil structure. And we need to kind of increase that fungal presence. And so on the ground, things you can do for that, if that's kind of what the aim is things like reduced tillage, diverse sleighs, composts, those are kind of organic matter inputs. But yeah, so but say for more kind of depends what you're trying to grow. So if it's more kind of short-term cropping, you might actually want a more bacteria-driven system for kind of that fast nutrient cycling. So again, it comes back to that kind of what's the system trying to do and the kind of data you've got on the biology, how does it reflect that? So things like the microbarometer is really useful for that. So because you can kind of change your practice depending on what you're trying to do in your particular farm, in your particular context, and regularly be able to monitor how that's changing and adjusting, and kind of could adjust your practices to that.
Thank you. I think we have mentioned the question of territorial level, but not the question of time. So how to select indicators that make sense, not only for now, but also in long term. So that was, I think, very useful to point out. I will go to Fatima for one question, and here again, I can pick one for you, but if you want to mark, I think there is a few questions that are very technical. So for example, how you scale your in situ spectroscopy data, and how you collect this information. Do you have a portable, but also to what extent do you think NeoSpectra can be useful in soil compaction monitoring? So there is a question on the technical applicability of what you explained. So if you could give few more on site, it will be very useful.
Yeah, sure. So the portable spectrometer, yes, we have. The NeoSpectra is the one that we are using, and we take it to the field. And because, it can be really affected by the environment around, so we try to record the moisture, but we also have the EC probes and pH probes at the field. So we took also those measurements on the soil, but also we record the temperature, if it's raining or not, crop condition. We record all this information, and we have our spectrometer, and we take it to the field, and then we just measure it. And later we are going to compare the in situ data with the one that they dried and sieved soil data. I guess I could cover this one. And the other one was that if NeoSpectra directly affecting the compaction. I would say no. I mean, not directly, but indirectly, of course, because we have organic carbon that we can estimate from the spectral data. And for example, like moisture, organic carbon, bulk density, they all can be estimated from the spectral data. So they can be affected by the soil compaction, not directly. So it's a bit indirect. And what else? I guess, there is a question to me, but it's Karen already answered that. Fungal to bacteria ratio. Yeah, it's a bit context dependent. And that's all.
Thank you. I think there are some that are answered in written form. So if you can see, there is also a window that is reply answer. So those interests can also open that window to check the answer. So we were not able to tackle all, but at least some. And before going to our second round, let's say, I would like to pose you the few questions that we prepare for a conclusion that relate more to the validity of and the use of index, soil monitoring index, I believe. Sorry. So also to bring back the audience to the discussion, one of the first, you can again scan this, scan the QR code that is not there, but there is the number, and I believe you have used it now, it's saved in your mobile phone. One of the questions we would like to discuss with you is if index, do you think index are the best way for evaluating the health of soil across a region? And assessing soil health should focus on management rather than on solution. So here we ask you to mark whether you strongly agree or strongly disagree with these two statements. So one is related whether we need index for evaluating soil health, and the other one is to what extent we should focus on management rather than outcomes. So shall we try and understand the best management practice in a certain areas and how to implement them? It is a tricky because as often happen is in the middle. There is not a clear and one way might be a good result. This means that the question are something that needs to be discussed. Is not there is not a clear solution on this yet. So I'm not sure if there is a second question. Otherwise, I would let's wait 1 minute more, because it's true that for answering to this question, it requires some thinking. It's not so straightforward. Okay, so I will go back to the question and try to ask speakers, starting again from Niels, to discuss about these two statements, but also in relation with the work you presented. So to what extent also do you think that index, and we know that soil monitoring law contains a number of soil descriptors, and the idea is really to try to have a view on soil health. And just also the definition of soil health has created some discussion. So what is your view, also thinking about all the question and the work on data you are carrying out on the need of soil index, or also to what extent do you think management and practice can complement, if not override, let's say, outcomes monitoring?
Yeah, thanks. Well, regarding the index, of course, there are a lot of disadvantages when working with just one single index. But at the same time, it can also be a very powerful tool towards non-experts and also towards policymakers. It can be very powerful to just show one single value showing the state of the soil of a certain area, and can be very useful in communicating. But I think then if you are using an index, that it should also always be come together with a narrative where you are explaining how this index has been built, how this need to be interpreted, which different purposes you had in mind when creating this index. So I think it should always be accompanied with a narrative on the status of your soil. And then on the second statement on whether we should assess soil management or outcome, I believe that it's indeed very important to also look at management practices and assess management practices. But at the same time, we also need to see on the long term what are the results of these management practices, because the end goal is a healthy soil, and so we need to be able to verify whether we are close by this soil health or not. So we also need to check on this outcome to whether we see we are moving in the right direction or not. So that's my brief ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would tend to ask the same question to Karen, but slightly different for the scale. So you work with farmers. Do they prefer like a meta indicator? They prefer index? Do you think could be a useful tool, not just for policymakers, but also for communicating with farmers, or is an additional layer and we need to to think about, formulate something different for farmers? So changing perspective.
Yeah, I think farmers, they quite like an index when it comes to kind of benchmarking. They quite like, kind of my experience on projects, they quite like to know kind of people in their area, kind of where do they sit compared to somebody else. See, it's very contextual, but kind of on a more local scale, they do quite to see, oh, how am I on that kind of scale of average? I think it's quite useful for that. But I would say I think they're very difficult to pull apart, really, because they both have their place. So the indexes, they are very good for that kind of snapshot of what's going on in the soil at that time, and being able farmers that tool to be able to compare that. But obviously being a farm on the ground, that kind of the actual management, ongoing management of it is also really important, not just that kind of final outcome. And I feel we just need that kind of ongoing support for farmers, the kind of the education, the finance, for them to be able to do both.
Thank you. And on management rather than outcomes, what do you think is in line with what Niels answered?
Yeah, so like the actual management of it, so the actual on the ground practices that farmers are doing, I think we're still very kind of in that transition of farmers are quite nervous to kind of change their management, mainly for economic reasons. And we kind of need to teach those skills, build that confidence, and also help finance them to actually be able to focus on the management as well as the kind of final outcome of that.
Thank you. So for Fatimat, I will give a technical twist because so one of the problem, and for me that I'm not a soil scientist, is also how to compare data, which are the method and technology and indicator that how we can ensure that soil monitoring that happen in different places can be compared. So there are methods or more advanced, or there are indicators that are more difficult to compare. And where there is a gap we need to fill also, because these are research projects. So it's also work in the making, let's say.
Sure. Okay. So as I said, as also Niels mentioned, that we have these mission objectives, and our indicators also are going towards that indicators. Like, for example, infiltration rate, it's really directly correlated with the compaction of the soil or soil erosion. But our hypothesis here is that, or we are hoping also, like, that if we have the eDNA richness, then they are going to be correlated with enzymatic activity, and then those going to be correlated with infiltration, and those going to be correlated with organic carbon. So now we are focusing on the correlation between these methods and comparing how they are working towards each other. But also, like, first correlation between these methods, but also their independence. Like, if we can just say one method to the farmers, like as Karen also mentioned, like they are quite resistant to the new technologies or measurements. If I can introduce one method or measurements to them, okay, you just go and then do the microbiometer. can we trust on that method only? You know, we are looking also for interdependence of these models as well. So both correlation and interdependence. And we are, yeah, I guess I hope I could cover the question.
Thank you. Thank you. It was very, I think, thank you for the speakers, because there are so many questions and answers, and it's not easy to have the prompt feedback. We have still, let's say, 10 minutes before the closing. So I would like to have a really last round of question and going back to what was provided. But at the same time, I would like for you to say what you more open for the future. So what you expect and what you recommend to the audience to look at. So looking at the question asked, that there are many and varied, and I'm afraid that we can target them. So pick up a question if you have the time that you would like to answer, but at the same time, I would like a final word for this webinar, saying on your reference and also what you wish for this audience to follow up, and because are your wish, let's say, for improving soil health monitoring, and that will be great as a closing of this session. So if there is a special question that you think was unsolved and you would like to point out, and a recommendation and wish for the future, let's say, of soil health monitoring, but also, let's say, a suggestion for our attendees. I'm sorry, I don't know if invert order, but that can create some confusion also, because I don't want to take by surprise no one. So I will go back to Niels, unless you don't want to change and someone want to jump in for this final round. So I'm afraid, Niels, you are the first again.
Okay, don't worry. Yeah, what can I say? I think there are very interesting times to be to work on soil monitoring and to work on soils, because we have now this renewed attention by policymakers on soils finally, let's say, and I think with the upcoming soil monitoring law, it's a very important step, and it will really help us to work towards soil health, and it will really help to bring these soil monitoring aspects to a next level, not only within science but also within society, and to have a more easy acceptation of sustainable soil management practices. And at the same time, I'm really happy that also the Mission Soil projects are so active in this. The AI for Soil Health is really active in this improving soil monitoring aspects, and I think that's really, really important also towards policymakers at the EU level, that we have these Mission Soil projects working on these topics. So that were my final words. If maybe I missed some detailed questions for me, I will double check it in the chat, and maybe I will answer by written then. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it's very hard, and thank you for trying up to catch with so many questions. That is a good sign that real time are good and interest is high. So Karen, what is your expectation and suggestion for the next future?
So I would say that I'm quite optimistic, actually, because I've been working in a similar field for 20 years now. And I did my master's project on kind of how we encourage more uptake of agroecological farming practices for soil health only 7 years ago. And I feel like the landscape feels like it's shifted quite significantly in those 7 years. There's a lot more kind of what I call soil consciousness. There's a lot more kind of like awareness for the farmers I talk to, kind of in the mainstream farming press. There's a lot more talk on kind of soil health and different regenerative practices for that. So I think there's a lot more discussion around it. And I think it was like 2022, I saw a survey by ADAS, a research centre in the UK, that's something like only 36% of farmers tested their organic matter. And I know that when I was an agronomist, it wasn't something that was routine to do. Like we tested for your macronutrients and your pH, whereas now I think a lot more farmers and advisors are actually monitoring those kind of more very important but basic tests. So I think all this kind of everyone's starting to get smartphones, use apps. So I think that could all come together and really help get more of a kind of easier, consistent, quicker in-field analysis, because sometimes that's the barrier, really, having to take the sample and send it off. So I think that combination of making sure we kind of ground truth as well as sending off. But yeah, I think we are definitely starting to turn a corner in the right way when it comes to soil health.
Thank you. This is an impression that I also have, that there is a good time, even if it's important to keep the attention on environment and soil that could easily, let's say, drop if there is not data, social awareness, interest of citizen. And I think Index is really a way also to bring society into the discussion that sometimes is not easy when it's too technical, the way information are communicated. I don't know, Fatima, from your standing point, more technological and also more technological and soil practice related. What are your expectation and suggestion also?
Okay, so there is a question. I would like to mention two things. First is a question that brings up in the chat. What AI methodology or techniques you are using in the project? I have to explain about the project a little bit also. I don't know if people were also there for the first webinar, which was about Eco Data Cube or the raster data cube. That's one also is another output of this project, and they are building the raster data cubes for all the soil forming factors from the climate, topography, parent material, lithological information for 22 years, from 2000 to 2022, I guess. And they are using all kind of machine learning to predict the soil properties for the whole EU. So first, we are using that Eco Data Cube, and I can share the link as well. But also the recording of the first webinar also is available at the YouTube, that they can just search for that. But also the things that I want also to mention is that please, whenever you have an article or paper that you want to record about the soil health, do just not misinterpret the soil health as soil organic carbon only, or like one of the wet chemistry methods. Please, if you want to talk about the soil health, make sure that you are considering all the perspectives, like biological, wet chemistry, and physical properties of the soil. So that's the two things that I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Nima. Fatima, I was reading the chat. I think it's really important to be sure that, there are different aspects of soil health to measure it. There is different policy perspective, interest on soil. There is territorial level, and there is time span to consider. So this is the complexity of the soil monitoring, let's say, puzzle that we are all working to understand more, and to make sure that is considered by all stakeholders. So just policy, but farmers, landowner, and farmers. And I also thank Fatima because she mentioned that is the last slide that we would like to spend a few minutes just to recall that this webinar is organized in the framework of 4 webinars. The first one has been more or less 1 month ago, but the recording are available on the project website, on AI for Soil Health website, and that delve more in depth on the data cube. So those of you interested in having, let's say, a tool and how to be used this tool, please look at the webinar. It's like this one is a conversation, but it's really give details on the products that the project is building, and is Open Joab that have been the speakers, and they are also the main partners developing the tools. So for those of you interested on, let's say, in the application of the artificial intelligence, it will be great to look at the webinar and also use the tool that is available online. And the next webinar will be in September. I don't know if we have a final slide to say that, but we still don't have. Yes, thank you. The next webinar, there is still not a date, but this one will be shared on the AI for Soil Health website as well on social media and recorded in YouTube. We also share a survey. It's not just more question, but is to tailor the webinar to your needs. So there will be a question on this one, but also on your wish list for the next webinar. And we really, before closing, I don't know, sorry, because I'm afraid that there is still one question on Menti, and I see people are already answering that was about to what extent your knowledge on soil health has improved during this webinar. I think it was quite complex and comprehensive, so might be need to be seen another time also for me that I'm working on this, because it was rich. And I'm sorry I was not able to pose all your questions, but there were many, and this is a good sign. And also thank you very much, the three speakers, for their effort, not just on making the presentation, but answering to question and answer, both on writing and in Word. And it's not always easy to to pick up and answer. So really, thank you for the time and your dedication to this project, and also on giving different perspective on soil monitoring from scale and technical part. And a big thank to Soil Association that have been working for putting us together and also solving from script to Menti and engaging with all of you. I think it's great for us to have feedback, as I said. So please, beside these, for those who have little improvement or moderate improvement, answer to the survey so we can understand more how to get to to better result. Thank you very much. I think we are finalized that, and as I mentioned, that will all be shared, unless there are no few additional question remarks from speakers that would like to do. I will tend to close the session. So let me know, Niels, Karen, Fatima. It's fine.
All fine from my side. Thank you for organizing. Thank you for coordinating.
Thank you, and wish you all a great weekend. Well-deserved, relaxing weekend. Thank you.